So I knew what I wanted to talk about this weekend. And as I went out searching for resource material, support material, and ways to present this, I came across this wonderful article by a gentleman named Thomas Kalopoulos in the April 2019 issue of Inc. magazine. And it's so ironic because the title of his article was exactly the Google search criteria I put in. And it's titled, Everything Doesn't Always Happen for a Reason. But before your head explodes, just stick with me because I think you'll get what I'm trying to say when I'm done. So when I think of all the successful people I've known in my life and how I admired how they showed up in the world and how they lived their lives, I never really got it until recently. That in a moment of loss or failure, I never once heard them or heard of them saying, well, everything happens for a reason, like it's some cosmic mystery, something they're not privy to. Now, I do believe in divine intervention on occasion, but honestly, that everything happens for a reason is now completely lost on me. Because it just seems to me to be a way to pawn off the responsibility of making hard choices about how we choose to redirect, to reframe, to reevaluate our own lives with meaning. Now, a few months ago, I spoke about how quantum physics is proving that God, and I'm going to use the word God because it's short, that we co-create our lives with God. And it goes loosely like this. God has an experience, and this is like a chicken and egg thing. I don't know which came first, probably the God essence. But God has an experience. She shares it with us. We take in that experience, we integrate it, we get learning from it, we define it, create a new experience out of that, and feed it back to God, who then takes our experience and creates yet another new experience in this beautiful dance of reciprocity. And that's a gift we're all born with. Now, following that thought and theory, which feels very true to me, I just got to ask myself, how in the world can there be reason for anything? That would simply imply that there's some structure or lesson that we're presupposed to learn, and frankly, I just don't see how that can happen in a universe in which we continually co-create. As I watched our beautiful sister Judith Rodin slowly fade from this earth plane, I first thought, this doesn't make any sense. God must have another plan for her, some bigger plan. But eventually I had to go within and ask myself, what meaning can I get out of Judith's life and death? What I got was that it was not only time to let my colors shine and show, it was also time to dance like no one was watching, sing and drum like no one was listening. And anybody that knew Judith knows exactly what I'm talking about. You see, the only meaning of anything that happens in our lives, whether to us or to those around us, is the meaning we give it. So we can play the victim by throwing up our hands and saying, well, everything happens for a reason. I won't find out until the afterlife. Or we can embrace it and find meaning in it now to better our lives, our soul's journey, our family, and make necessary changes to live our very best lives ever. The truth is, especially in spiritual communities like ours, we tend to take the reason concept to a whole new level, sort of like spiritual bypassing. What I mean by that is we essentially remove any responsibility for creating resourceful meaning out of events in our lives and have somehow attempted to create a logical notion of there being a reason for everything to the point of absurdity. It's not that reason is completely absent from our lives, or that it even should be, but we use it as a crutch for avoiding growth and often look for it in all the wrong places. Like a higher power, fate, preordained script for our life, a greater purpose, or some omnipotent force in the universe that certainly knows what's best for us, right? But how would any of that fit in with our co-created life with God? I get it. We often use the phrase to offer comfort by attempting to give meaning to events that often seem to be without any conceivable reason. But at some point, we just got to admit, one makes more sense than the other, to me. I've always found it profoundly unsettling and extraordinarily selfish to believe that the sole purpose of life's heartaches, failures, losses, illnesses, and vast assortment of derailments is to teach us some fateful lesson that we have been preordained to learn. A failed business, divorce, the loss of a loved one, dashed dreams, natural disasters. Each is excruciating in its own very unique way, but the idea that life's unfairness is somehow supposed to be justified by a scripted reason is, to me, the ultimate abandonment of accountability and reason. I'm just going to say it. It's just lazy. It's the same sort of lazy thinking that we buy into when we accept that success is just about being at the right place at the right time. Hey, that could have been me if I just had the same breaks he did. What's that supposed to mean? That this same higher power that's making everything happen for a reason doesn't like you enough to give you a break? This is not an assault on our faith in God or trust in something greater than ourselves, but if I'm to believe that I co-create the experiences in my life, then I can't possibly believe that any higher power would pick and choose who's going to get to be successful or not, who's going to have a long life or die too young. It's up to us to create meaning out of life's experiences, not make some blanket excuse for things that happen in our lives. The responsibility for love, happiness, success, financial abundance is on each of us. And so is the responsibility for creating meaning out of life's biggest disappointments. Notice I said meaning, not reason, because while we should own up to the mistakes we've made that account for failure, lost love, illness, sometimes there's just no good reason why something bad has happened. But we can find meaning in it. Maybe luck plays a role in how our lives play out, or that maybe events can be instrumental in helping us define our purpose. But when terrible things happen to us, it's a rare one that it's just us that they impact. And saying that the reason they happened was to help us is just a convenient and super selfish excuse to absolve ourselves of responsibility and to outright ignore the pain that these same circumstances may have caused other people. If you've ever had a loved one struggle with a terrible disease or debilitating event, you just got to ask yourself, what meaning can I find in this that I can use to help myself or others? We frequently try to tell ourselves there must be a reason for bad things happening to good people because we just can't see any reason why. And if there isn't a reason, then we would have to believe that the suffering, the failure, the loss was for nothing. And that, my friends, would be a really sad referendum on God. My eldest brother has dementia. I used to ask myself why. He is a great guy, fabulous father of 4, grandfather to more than I can count, and I've lost track of the great-grandkids. He's a wonderful big brother and the one I always turn to when I need a reminder of the father that we both share. So why? Why him? Because whatever we might be learning about the fragility and the value of life, how could there possibly be a reason for something like that to happen? I mean, was the world created with reasons just to teach me lessons at the expense of someone else's suffering? That doesn't even make sense. Then I realized that it didn't happen for me to discover some predetermined reason. Instead, it was my responsibility to create something way more important than reason. I had to create meaning. It's a subtle but powerful switch from reason to meaning, which goes well beyond semantics and instead speaks to the more important process of simply being accountable for how we heal and grow, and in turn how we create value that in some way will outlive the pain. Perhaps even someday it might eclipse it. Of course, it's a little challenging to accept that when you're in the middle of grieving of any kind of loss or failure, isn't it? But creating meaning out of it will be our very best guide through that failure or loss. In Thomas Kalopis' article, he wrote this wonderful story. A few years ago, a good friend lost her husband in a terrible accident. He had just retired early. They had 2 very young children to raise and a lifetime of plans ahead. In one terrible instant, everything changed. It's a scenario that few of us would ever care to contemplate. Would you want to be the one to tell her that it happened for a reason? No reason could justify that pain for her and her family and the loss of a life so suddenly cut short. Instead, she set out to create something that brought her, her children, and countless others to a place of healing by establishing an organization that helps those who have lost a spouse cope with the sudden loss. The look of joy in her eyes and the passion in her voice today is because she made the courageous choice to create meaning from something that will never, ever have, nor should ever have, any acceptable reason. The truth is, the reason bad things happen isn't somehow preordained onto our life path. Terrible things do not happen for reasons we can understand or even accept, but that doesn't mean that we're helpless. We are the ones who give meaning to what happens in our life with or without a conceivable reason. If we always look for the reason to somehow make itself known, to magically appear, fall from the sky, neatly wrapped with a bow, then we're avoiding the much harder work of taking what happened to us and to others who were impacted by it and creating something that actually has value. Something we can look back on with pride of knowing that we weren't following a script, but we were writing it. Whether it's a business failure, a personal loss, professional setback, the same applies. We don't own events or their reasons, but we do own what we do with them. But make no mistake, creating meaning requires work, and it takes a lot more effort than accepting some lame excuse that we have no control over. It means moving from being a victim of your circumstances to a creator of your future, turning despair and pain into hope, failure and loss into success. Giving meaning to something is a world apart from finding a reason for it. A meaning can exist in complete absence of reason. One clings to the past, and the other focuses on the future. It means looking back with gratitude, and then, only then, defining a path forward that you'd likely never have taken before. Thank you. I'm Kimberly Kelley, your spiritual director at the Center of Universal Light. I love you all.